In yesterday's video, I shared with you how I dyed these 18 colors using just the 6 Easter egg dye tablets from 2 kits of dye. And today, I want to share how my kids dyed up these 2 skeins using their leftover egg dye when we dyed eggs for the Easter Bunny to hide, and how I gave speckling with Easter egg tablets a try, and whether or not I think that the results of this were successful. Hey there, Fibre friends, I'm Sarah, and today we are in my greenhouse, because although it is snowing again, just starting to outside, it is getting to be just about time for me to start starting seeds in my greenhouse, which means I have to clean it out. As you can see, all of the dead plants from last year are still in here. I'm gonna go ahead and say it wasn't just because I got halfway through cleaning it out and then gave up for winter. I'm gonna blame it on having cancer surgery in the fall. So all that is beyond the point. Today, if you clicked on this video, it's not for a look at my dead tomato vines. It is to do the second half of the Easter egg dyeing video. It's a little noisy up in the house today, so I thought this might be a fun place to record the intro and outro for this video. So let's go ahead and dive right into what you came for. So first, let's talk about the 2 skeins that my kids dyed. They're right here, and I will open them up and show you at the end of the little bit of dyeing footage. But I just wanted to say that every year after we dye our Easter eggs, we have taken the leftover dye and gone ahead and dyed up a couple of skeins of bare yarn. I always have bare yarn floating around in my not inconsiderable yarn stash, and so it's super easy to just go ahead and grab a skein of bare yarn. So those are just a KnitPicks Swish DK, which is, I believe, a 100% superwash merino DK weight yarn. And to get them ready for dyeing with my kids, all I do is I just soak those skeins in about 6 cups of water to 1 cup of vinegar. I don't really measure, it's more like I pour a bunch of water into a bowl and add a cup of vinegar into it. If you're particular about wanting to make sure that it won't tangle, you can always add a shower curtain ring or a loop of acrylic yarn. Both of those can be helpful in manipulating your yarn during the dyeing process. Then for my kids to dye it up, I just wring out some of the excess water, lay out the yarn in a oven-safe baking dish. In this case, I used like a Pyrex baking tray. And then I give it to my kids when they're all finished dyeing their eggs to dye up however they please. This year, my kids, Alex and Dom, who are almost 8 years old now, expressed interest in being the stars of this part of the video. They're kind of entering into that stage where they are becoming aware that some people make content for the internet, and so they were super excited to participate in the video themselves. So I will let them talk you through what they went ahead and did here. And they've got their little brother Marshall's help in the middle there. Marshall does have a band-aid on his chin. When you have 3 rough and tumble kids, sooner or later someone does get a boo-boo every now and then, but rest assured he is fine, and he is all the tougher for having 2 big brothers. Anyways, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna let Alex and Dom take it away and show you how they went about dyeing these 2 skeins of yarn.
So we used our volcanoes over there to make eggs, and also we used little rollers, and we also used our bands like these to paint eggs, and then they came out like this. Right now they're all dry, and now we're going to dye yarn
With
the squirter, rollers, and the paint jars.
Can Marshall do the first roller?
Yeah. Oh, but this one.
Okay.
How do you do it?
So dip it in the roll and then roll it on the yarn.
This one? Yeah. Just do it anywhere.
Yep.
Dip it.
Roll it right on.
No.
Alex, you can do, ooh, did it get tangled?
Yeah.
Alex, you can do some rolling too.
Can I?
Yeah, Dom, fill up your squirter.
And then do I just squirt it?
Yeah.
I'm using yellow. So do I just
Squirt it on the yarn.
Can I do it? Can I do it? I turn.
Yeah.
Can we do whatever color?
Whatever color you want. This is your
no,
yarn.
I don't want to do that green. Okay. This green? Yes. And then thanks.
Now squirt it where you want to squirt it.
My turn.
Good job.
Now
what color are we filling up next?
Blue. My turn. My turn now.
Pass it to... Okay, Dom, do one for Marshall.
You want green again? Green again. Now I'm going to take some blue. So this bad. My blue's about to run out, but it's actually white. Oh, okay, this time I'm going to do 3 colors. A little bit of this, a little bit of this, and now I made light green. Do you want to do light green? Yeah. A little bit of this, and a lot of this. Here's light green. Light green. A little bit over here, a little bit over there. It turns red. It turns like a heart color. It turns like... Give it back? It turns like a heart color. Now I'm going to do a little bit this, little bit of 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 this, and a whole lot of this. This is all these colors. Black. Wow, I made brown. This time we're going to take the bottles of extra dye and pour them.
Okay.
I'm going first with blue.
On top of the yarn, bud.
I'm going to put it extra now.
Yeah, all of it in there. Okay, Dom, you pour your edge now.
No, but what about Alex?
Okay, Alex is going to go all the way across.
Alex is going to use both of them. And then Marshall's going to use both. Pinky purple.
Okay. Marshall, your turn.
A little pink here on blue.
That's okay. Okay. Now pour your other one, Marshall. Okay. Now, Dom, find an empty white spot and fill it up with your colors.
You can fill it up over here.
Good job. And the last color.
Still have a little bit left of this.
Good job.
Now,
Everyone smile. So once they were finished putting all of the color on, to set the dye, it was really quite simple. I just popped those trays right into my oven at about 230 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just about as low as my oven will go. At this temperature, you're not at risk of really burning your yarn unless it dehydrates out completely. So as long as that yarn is still damp, it is plenty safe to go into the oven. So 230 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes, went ahead and completely set the color on both of these skeins of yarn. Then a quick rinse in the sink using some Dawn dish detergent and drying overnight, and we have the first skein. So this is the one that Alex used some roll-on dye. That was from a sort of interesting egg kit that he had purchased this year. And Dom and Marshall used a little syringe to just squirt bits of dye on. And we got a really lovely kind of speckled, kind of variegated skein. This particular dye kit seemed to sort of heavily favor greens and blues. Similar to the mini skeins that I dyed in yesterday's video, but overall the skein is quite lovely, and it is nice to leave some undyed white area. It prevents the skein from becoming sort of oversaturated or overly muddied. And so we have the first skein here. The second skein is the one that they actually poured the remaining cups of dye onto, and this one here is sort of more of a block of each color throughout the skein, but it penetrated well into the interior of the skein. And again, I think I have a result that will knit up really quite nicely. I have promised the boys hats knit from these 2 skeins of yarn. So I think that what I will do is just alternate a strand from each skein as I knit up a set of toques from 2 skeins of DK weight yarn. I suspect I should be able to get 3 hats for my kids, no problem. So overall, Alex and Dom and Marshall had a super successful dyeing experiment this year. And once again, I'd point out that this is the easiest way, bar none, to get your kids involved in a little bit of fun with dyeing yarn. Get them involved in the idea that they can have a hand in the process of making some of their own garments or clothing. So that's Alex and Dom and Marshall's Easter egg dye job for 2024. Now this is the final skein of yarn that I wanted to share with you. And this was an idea I've had percolating in my head for quite some time. And that is, since Easter egg dyes in the tablet form are a solid, could you speckle with that dye? One of the ways that indie dyers go about getting a speckled finish on their yarn is to take the powdered dye before you make it up into solution and just sprinkle it onto yarn that has been pre-soaked in a water and acid, whether that's vinegar or citric acid solution. Sprinkle it on and then heat set those speckles. So I have had this idea percolating that if I used a mortar and pestle to break up those dye tablets, could I achieve that same or a similar speckling effect? And I would say that I would call this a medium success. So all that I went ahead and did was take a mortar and pestle to crush the dye tablet. And then I had a skein of yarn. This time this is a 75% superwash wool, 25% nylon fingering weight yarn. I pre-soaked it in that same bowl of water with a cup of vinegar in it, lay it out in my oven-safe Pyrex baking tray, and then I went ahead and sprinkled each of the tablets onto the yarn. I did flip the yarn over in that tray partway through in order to make sure that I had even distribution of colors throughout the skein. And if you look at my skein here, you can certainly see that I have color well distributed throughout. And then using that same, put it in the oven about 230 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes to heat set the yarn. I got my final result here. Would I say that this was a success? First off, as we discussed yesterday in the dyeing of the mini skeins, I think that each dye tablet is really only sufficient to give concentrated color on about 10 grams of yarn. Now, obviously, when you're speckling, you want to have a lot of undyed areas relative to those dye tablets. But what I found was that when I crushed the dye tablet in the mortar and pestle, it really produced such a tiny amount of powder that you couldn't speckle very far with one color. When I've seen videos of dyers speckling in a more conventional way, they often might use a whole teaspoon of dye powder, or much more than that even, per skein. So I did feel that while it was something that certainly worked, it was such a small amount of dye powder that you could sort of collect to speckle. The second thing is that I was using my gloves to pick up the dye powder from the mortar and pestle and sprinkle it on like this. Wouldn't recommend that. If I were to repeat this in the future, I would want to sort of crush my dye powder maybe on a little piece of paper. When I used to work in a biochemistry lab, if we needed to break something up, we might do it on like a little piece of weighing paper so that you could fold it and then pour that powder off after, and make sure that none was left behind. Because I just went directly from the mortar and pestle, I found that it was difficult to get all of the powdered dye out of the mortar and pestle and onto my yarn. So maybe having sort of a drier intermediate step to really make sure that I wasn't losing any dye to the moisture on my gloves or to just the mortar and pestle itself would have been helpful. But overall, you can see on my skein, hopefully, that I do have some sections with some really nice little speckles in my yarn. And then I also have some sections where the colors ran and bled quite freely. Part of this may have come from, at the end, giving my mortar and pestle a little rinse out with water and pouring some of that dye solution in. So I knew I was going to sort of destroy some of my speckling. Some of it came from, you know, after I sprinkled my dye powder on, I kind of rubbed my dye covered fingers on the surface of the yarn. So I really definitely kind of broke up the purity of just a speckled yarn, but I would say that I got some areas that speckled really nicely, and overall I got a skein that I will be happy to knit myself a pair of socks with. The other thing is that I did note that not all of the dye set perfectly with this skein. And I found that this also happens with conventional speckling. When you speckle onto your dye, you end up with sort of a dry chunk of dye on top of your wet yarn, and it's really only going to be able to diffuse so much, and you'll often have sort of unspent dye left behind. Then when you go to rinse that dye off in the sink, you'll find a lot of color will sometimes bleed from these speckled yarns. Can you rinse it away and have a yarn that will not bleed anymore? Absolutely. After 2 rinses in the sink, it wasn't bleeding anymore, so I had washed away all of the unbound dye. But that is dye that is wasted down the drain rather than set onto your yarn. So just be aware of that, and make sure that when you speckle yarn, you give it a really thorough rinsing. Overall, I got 3 additional skeins of lovely colorful yarn. There is certainly always a little bit of a muddying effect when you use all of the colors that come in an Easter egg kit, because you're going around the full color wheel, and you would have potentially a less muddied yarn if I had chosen to only, say, use the pinks and blues or the blues and greens. And so you don't cross over into opposite colors on the color wheel, which will muddy out to like a brown situation. But I think that I'm very happy with the results of these very fun, easy, low risk, low setup cost dyeing experiments that you can also do in your own kitchen. They are a totally food safe alternative to conventional dyeing, and therefore a lot of fun if you're just wanting to play around with dyeing every now and then. That's all I've got for today. If you're interested in more dyeing content, I have in the past done a few dyeing videos here on my channel, and so I will link a playlist of those here. And don't forget to give me a subscribe if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on any of the fun experiments coming out of my yarn lab. Bye for now.